caterpillar called Mathew.
Hey, Skye! Meet Geeti Ahuja.
Shweta continued, her voice loud and hearty as ever.
She's new.
I was indeed brand new at boarding school, and Shweta, whom I knew from home, had taken me under her wing. She was introducing me to all her friends, which I really appreciated. It was strange and lonesome being new, and I've always been a bad mixer. But I couldn't help feeling a little conscious too that Shweta had to do it because her parents must have told her. That it must be a little boring for her, having me tag along. We were very different people. She was the chatty, sporty kind, while I was quite the bookworm and didn't talk much. Hi, Skye? I mumbled awkwardly. Surely that was not her real name. I couldn't help thinking, but what an odd nickname. She must have read my thoughts because she replied with an impish grin.
It's Akashvani Rai Chaudhary, actually.
This sounded even stranger than Skye. Akashvani? I burst out, forgetting my shyness, as well as forgetting that I was being rather rude. That's your name.
Yup, it is.
She grinned again. Wow, I just couldn't stop myself. Who named you?
My grandfather,
She said.
he was very fond of listening to the radio. All India radio. Akashvani.
Her eyes twinkled so merrily behind her glasses that I couldn't help giggling. And somehow it felt okay, as if she knew that I wasn't laughing at her odd name, but enjoying it with her. I couldn't help throwing a curious look at the cardboard box she was holding. It had a lot of holes punched into the lid.
Hey Geeti, meet Mathew.
She chuckled, opening it up. It was full of leaves. Mathew? I glanced around, puzzled. I couldn't see any Mathew-type person around, and this was a strictly girls' school. But after Skye and Akashvani, anything seemed possible.
Mathew is a caterpillar.
Shweta said, nudging me gently. A caterpillar! My eyes almost popped out. Then I saw him, the fuzzy green caterpillar in the box, almost lost in his nest of broad dock leaves.
Say hi to Mathew, Geeti.
Skye said. I gaped at her, but she was absolutely serious. Hi, Mathew, I said softly, feeling quite silly. But it seemed to me the creature actually stopped munching to look up.
He likes you.
Skye chortled, closing the box. Does he? I was idiotically pleased. The truth was, I had been feeling rather low. Coming to a boarding school in the middle of the term was an upsetting experience, even though this was something that had been discussed at home for a long time. Feeling thrilled that a caterpillar liked me, he could not possibly. At 11, I was old enough to know better. Caterpillars didn't have feelings. But I sensed that in a roundabout way, Skye was saying that she liked me. This thought warmed me like a blast of sunshine on a January morning. At that moment, I badly needed a friend. Still, it took me some time to get over my homesickness altogether. It was my third night in school. The huge dormitory with its rows of beds felt cold and empty. In spite of all the girls sleeping around me, I missed my cozy little room, especially the fact that if I needed anything, Mama and Dad were just across the passage. Here, when scary shadows waved at the windows, and the wooden floor creaked spookily. All I could do was cower under my quilt and try to quieten my frantically beating heart. I was actually crying that night when I heard a whisper, "Kitty." For a moment, my heart stopped with fright. Then,
"It's me, Skye.
reassured me.
Listen,
She whispered.
I got a parcel from home. Come and try some of the goodies."
I slipped out of bed and followed her, quiet as a mouse. It didn't strike me to ask why the goodies were to be consumed in the hidey hole under the stairs at midnight, rather than in the dining room at tea time as usual. But deliciously crumbly besan laddus and matri with achar had never tasted better than they did that night. And when I crept back to bed, I fell asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. Soon I fell into the routine. I got used to boarding school life, and Skye became my closest friend. But what an odd girl she was, and how she adored Mathew. She had long conversations with him, one-sided ones, of course. How could one get so attached to a caterpillar? I couldn't help wondering, but then I realized it was the only kind of pet one could keep in boarding school. "Why did you call him Mathew?" I asked one day. I too had kept caterpillars, but had never thought of naming them.
"Well,"
She said thoughtfully.
"Mathew, it's a stately sort of a name. And he looks stately, doesn't he?"
I looked down at Mathew, moving slowly and sluggishly among the leaves, munching away without a care in the world. Yes, he was stately. Mathew suited him perfectly as a name. "Imagine," I said, "soon he'll turn into a butterfly and fly away."
"Oh no, please don't remind me."
Skye looked almost tearful. It was a real shock to see her looking sad. I was so used to her giggling all the time.
"I can't bear the thought.
She continued.
Mathew flying away. It's too awful."
I stared at her. What a funny girl, I thought. Why had she kept a caterpillar as a pet? Everyone knows that caterpillars have to turn into butterflies someday. And it looked to me that Mathew was going to become one any day now. He would soon turn into a chrysalis and then into a butterfly, which could never be kept in a box if you wanted it to live. But Skye did not want to face that fact. It made me feel terrible for her, that she would have to lose Mathew. But what could anyone do? The next morning, it happened. Skye had been sent to the dormitory after breakfast to sew on a button missing on her blouse. I ran to feed Mathew, but when I opened the box, he wasn't there, only a lifeless-looking chrysalis. I felt like crying. Poor Skye. What would she do without Mathew? It was too awful for words. Suddenly, I remembered something. While collecting leaves, I had seen another caterpillar, the spitting image of Mathew. His twin, I thought with a smile. Suppose I dashed out at once. There was no time to lose. Luckily, I found the caterpillar. Carefully, I carried it back on a leaf. I had just lowered it into the box when Skye walked into the room.
"Have you fed Mathew?"
She asked anxiously. Yeah. I was quite breathless. She took the box from me.
"Hi, old fuzzy wuzzy,"
She said affectionately. I held my breath, but it was all right. She hadn't caught on. After that, I kept an eye out for caterpillars of the Mathew breed. Fortunately, there were plenty around. As soon as the latest Mathew showed signs of being ready for a changeover, I quietly popped in the next one. I was on to my third Mathew when Skye suddenly asked me one day.
Do you think there's something wrong with Mathew?
She looked quite worried. What do you mean? I asked, feeling uneasy, but trying not to show it.
Well, he's taking a rather long time to turn into a butterfly. Do you think he's suffering from some kind of deficiency?
She frowned. I don't think so, I stammered. I pretended to examine Mathew closely. He looks perfectly fine to me. No need for tonics. I tried to laugh at my own feeble joke. And maybe some caterpillars take longer than others. Skye gave me a funny look. Maybe I stuttered too much.
Another odd thing.
She said slowly.
He seems to keep changing in size. Grow smaller and bigger, bigger and smaller.
Bigger and smaller. My face went red. Naturally, each time I'd chosen a slightly smaller caterpillar, so he'd last longer. I couldn't choose another Mathew that was just about to change, could I? What nonsense, I began. You must be imagining. Then I stopped short. Skye's gaze was fixed on me, meaningfully. Her eyes were twinkling. My heart lurched. She knows, I thought. You knew? I cried out. You knew all along? I felt like a complete idiot.
Obviously,
She replied, smiling.
caterpillars don't generally shrink.
Then why? I began indignantly and gave up. Because she was laughing her fat, rollicking laugh, which made me laugh too. It was so infectious. We laughed and laughed till we were breathless and our stomachs ached.
You nut!
She said finally.
You crazy silly nut! You kept changing caterpillars on me and I didn't have the heart to tell you I'd guessed.
She squeezed my arm and her eyes misted behind her glasses.
You didn't have to do that. It was just a caterpillar.
No, I said firmly. Not just a caterpillar. He was a caterpillar called Mathew.